On this week's show, Connecting the Dots with Aviv Leibovici from Buildots. In this week's news, crane safety, AI strategy, TENA, and more. All right. It's the nicest time of the year in Chicago, so Eveart has to come on, turn his camera on, and let you look outside of the windows. Eveart Foster, how you doing, my friend?
I'm blessed. Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Hope all's well.
All is well, because I'll be seeing you in Chicago next week. This will be out well after that. However, we will have seen each other. We can break bread. We can hang out. You're going to be at AGCIT Forum, right?
Yep, I'm doing a presentation. It's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that. We'll have to do a little recap after we're done, right?
Perfect.
Awesome. And we have a special guest with us, as always, every week. Aviv, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, Eveart. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you. I know I'm just going to jump right into it. You got the baby changing table right behind you. So you've got some startups and some startups. So we got some things we're going to talk about. So y'all can tune in because, Aviv decided to put a few things on his plate, not to mention a fundamentally cool construction technology company. We'll be right back with him in a second. Before we do, you guys know the deal. We got to pause for the cause.
It's important everyone supports a culture of well-being in the field and is equipped with the tools to help prevent suicide in construction. Procore Safety Qualified courses were built in partnership with our customers, elevating enhancements to their standard OSHA training. And the Bringing the Right Mindset series equips individuals and leaders alike with the skills necessary to really build resilient teams. We've made these 3 courses available for free and on demand, and they're offered both in English as well as Spanish, and they are CEU certifiable. Procore.com/certified-qualified is where we host our Procore's learning portal, and anyone can use their Procore credentials or create a free account to get started.
All right, check us out on YouTube. I have seen you guys subscribing and I'm excited. And maybe it's because you want to hear your name. So the next person that subscribes, I'll say your name next week. Trust me, I will. That's it. Smash the subscribe button. See all our new content. Listen into the full form on video while you're supposed to be working. Yes, that's right. You can watch it on one side and technically work on the other. At the ConTech crew, we focus on technology that solves industry problems, and we've always believed in our sponsors. So much so that I went to work for one of them. So today, I want to talk to you about Join. Every construction project is a unique prototype, and it's actually shaped by thousands of decisions that impact the owner's business case, design, and the budget. Today, the communication driving these decisions is disjointed across all the stakeholders. Work happens in email, Excel, estimating, resulting in delays, waiting for decisions, waiting for access to information, and sometimes that information is outdated and incomplete. Managing the expectations of the team and keeping the project moving forward is a constant challenge, and a lot of times drives skepticism amongst the contributors. Join empowers general contractors to build with confidence and maximize the potential of every project by connecting these owners through new workflows that fit into your existing processes. We bring design teams and trade partners into a single platform. There's transparency and collaboration in the decision-making, which builds trusts and sets projects up for success. You might be asking yourself, do you need another tool? Well, let me tell you, Join fits in seamlessly with your processes and your other tools. In fact, we're here to help those other tools. Regardless of your estimating system or your project management process, Join will be a valuable added resource without disrupting those other systems and your teams. Check out Join, the collaborative project delivery platform for the built environment. Learn more at join.build. All right. Aviv Leibovici from Buildots. Tell us a little bit about you and what brought you to this crazy industry.
It's a thing in Israel, where I obviously come from, where people finish their compulsory military service and start companies. It's like more common than you expect. I know it sounds odd, but it is very common. And in that spirit, me and my two co-founders decided we're going to do something. We don't know what, and then started looking into what. And we wanted it to be a real world problem. Long story short, after looking at all sorts of things in all sorts of industries, we found what I can now definitely say is as real as it gets in construction.
I was going to say, I don't think you could have found anything more real than construction, which it's funny. You say that, you come out of the compulsory military service and then you start businesses, and we have seen a huge uptick in construction technology coming out of that exact process. Is there a reason? Is there something that you go through or experience that, drives people to it? Or is it, I mean, maybe it's just that we have a really big problem, so it's not hard to find us, but what are we thinking?
Well, I think I can only speak to myself, right? And me and my co-founders, we come from this military program called Talpiyot. And basically what they do is they teach you how to become a person that uses technology for the better of solving of, defense sector problems, so real world problems, how to become a person that can leverage technology for that purpose and lead organizations to leverage technology for that purpose. So then you leave that and you're like, do I really want to do something that you sell to a cloud company for somewhere there in the cloud? No. And that's how we started looking at real world industries. And as it happens in Israel, it's always a friend of a friend. So one of my co-founders, he has a good friend, like from the age of 4, works for the maybe not biggest, but best GC in Israel. He said, look, you guys have to meet this guy who's their sort of innovation manager. It wasn't the title at the time, but that's what he was doing. Met him for a cup of coffee, in which he spent an hour telling us, look, you want to solve something real? We have real. But for some reason, the technologists of the world don't necessarily focus on us. Maybe because it's more difficult, maybe because whatever. And he said, come here. And we started looking into that.
Well, foundationally, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because what you learned in that program was we're going to identify problems and then ask you to think of unique ways to solve them. And in construction, especially the technology, Eveart, you can attest to this, is a lot of the technology is, technology looking for a problem, right? It's a solution looking for a problem. And you went at it and were taught to go at it from the problem perspective, which probably is why we see such tangible pieces come out of it and why you were drawn to it, right? Because it does have some unique problems. So you have that experience. What are some of the problems then that you learned about that drew you guys to focus? All startups probably have a couple of different paths they could go down, but what brought you down the path you're at, and where are you today?
Yeah, well, what we started doing is learning. So we would go and meet. In Israel, it's very easy. Everyone knows everyone with a hop of one person in between. So we started meeting construction CEOs and developer guys and site guys and everything. I actually had a deal for a while with a superintendent of a project in Israel, where I could follow him around all day and ask any question that I want. And my side of the deal was that anything that needs to be carried, I carry, and I bring pastries in the morning. That was the deal. So I did that for a bit, and then came here to London, where I now live. And they have this thing here called Open Doors, where the top GCs actually have like guided tours of their construction sites once a year. So we came to that. And most people on that are like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about joining the industry, stuff like that. Then, oh, who are you guys? Oh, we're software people from Israel. And the superintendent looks at us like, okay, that's weird. But moving on. And started asking these guys questions. And eventually from all that and being with them and sitting in on weekly subcontractor meetings, fly on the wall and stuff like that, you realize that, this team, the GC team, is expected to manage this process, this unbelievably complex process with so many resources, so much money, based on their gut and what they can go out and find out themselves. I used to say that it's like taking a few people, sending them off to conquer Europe with a few sticks and a few stones, and good luck. And I, coming from my background, said this is unbelievable. How can somebody be expected to manage a process where if they want to know what's going on in the process, either they ask someone that gives them an answer that is half guesswork, half subjective, half whatever, or they need to go out and walk a whole site to figure it out themselves. It's unbelievable, and that's the problem. We said this has to be sorted. They have to be handed the information to then make the decisions.
It's so powerful. Eveart.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of in line, the reality capture technology, the reality capture workflows, the technology that I was brought into experience as my first piece of technology in construction, having joined the construction industry back in late 2015. One of my first assignments or my scope was laser scanning and 360 cameras and rolling that out and understanding the pain points that were existing prior to the technology being available, as well as the byproducts of the utilization of that technology. And then seeing that from 2016 to 2023, the evolution of this technology just been amazing, and what it's done as far as transforming the industry's ability to communicate. So it's very interesting how aggressively mature this technology sector has been, as well as the demand increasing and being almost a permanent adoption in a way, just like cell phones are at this point on a job site. Reality capture is a necessary task that any single job site, no matter how big or small, is going to use.
Yeah, and you got to bring the problems to people, right? Aviv, that's the power. We spend too much time going through things that aren't important, right? That are fine and good. And it's, to your point, Eveart, that's what, reality capture is great at. It's like, it'll tell us if it's been installed or hasn't. So bringing these problems to people, what were some of your early wins, some of the early things you decided you guys were going to focus on at Buildots?
Yeah. So look, it was all about, giving that information. My prime example was this weekly subcontractor meeting. I sat in on a lot of those. And I think my first actual memory of this is I sit in on a Friday, and the super asks, I think it was the electrical subcontractor, what's going on with level 4? And here's the answer, I'll be done on Thursday. Says, no, you can't be done on Thursday. I need to close up the walls. You got to be done on Tuesday. How can I be done on Tuesday? I can't be done by Tuesday. It's not enough. They agree Wednesday. Fast forward, the next Friday, I'm in that room again. And he asks them, what's going on with level 4? And the guy says Wednesday. Now, after that, I go to the super and say, you guys, you negotiated. You said Wednesday. Now we're here 2 days after that, and he's telling you next Wednesday, and you're not flipping out. Why are you not flipping out? He looks at me and smiles and says, oh, Aviv, look. When he said Thursday, he said that because he thought that's something that I am willing to hear. When I said Tuesday, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Had he said Friday, I'd say Wednesday. It's just, that's what I did. 2 days less to apply pressure. We agreed Wednesday because that's what people do. They compromise. And here we are a week later, and reality, which we both didn't know a week ago, blows up in our faces. And that's when I said, no, this can't be. You got to have a dashboard that tells you how much work has been done, at what pace. Therefore, in order to finish by Wednesday, you need 7 men, but you've had 3 men up until now. Is that going to happen?
That's great. It's not reality capture. It's reality captured to sort of guide. I'm interested on how that was accepted in the beginning, or at least even because that back and forth game, we've seen that forever, right? It's just kind of the way we play it. So to put transparency on anything in our process and expose it's kind of interesting. I wonder what that experience was like when you did it.
Yeah, I think that for me, there were 2 sides to that. There's because of the dynamics of the industry, the people on the GC side, when you suddenly tell them, look, instead of telling someone you're not done, and they will tell you that they are done, and you will discuss it for a bit, and maybe walk out to site to have a look, here's a dashboard. It will tell you 60% done. When you click that 60%, it will show you exactly the elements that are missing that are the extra 40%, which means you can just show the subcontractor that, and suddenly all the friction of that problem goes away. And now you're showing them that they're really behind, and now they just have to deal with the facts. That people like. The other side of it is that you do get the people that say, wait, I've been managing projects for a while. I know how to manage projects. You're coming here to tell me that I don't know what I'm doing and it needs to be done a different way. You're coming here to tell me that I don't know that this site is, that floor is 60% done, and they need you. And I think it's a very natural reaction. It's just about showing people the benefit that they can get from it.
It's interesting because all innovation is, no matter what industry you're in, it's a combination of people and process to create how technology is implemented, how technology is adopted, and what technology does from the standpoint of pushing that technology forward. And all organizations are different, all people are different, but the constant here is that this form of technology has replaced or disrupted, I'd say, the normalcy of being able to not hide the truth, but camouflage the reality from the standpoint of withholding information for the purpose of achieving something or exposing information for the purpose of achieving something. So when technology is involved that is, in a way, in its essence, existing to be non-biased, those who benefit from having bias are going to be the resistors. With that in mind, how has the overall project performance benefited or been impacted by utilization of this technology in a way that, had it not been adopted, you can see differences? Can you kind of dive into that as far as what's happened on the projects?
Yeah, definitely. I think it starts from the purpose. We set out to build a tool that the primary user of will be the superintendent. We set out to build something. We talked about, helping the way in which the project is delivered, and that the owner doesn't do that, and the VP in the head office doesn't do that. It's the superintendent on the ground managing the subcontractor that does that. So it was all about that. We call it, operational management. This is what it's really about. And then that comes into play really in I guess, three main aspects. One is managing the process as a process. The other is managing each subcontractor. And the third is sort of being on top of every detail. So if I give you three examples, if we talk about the process, we just did a webinar recently with Danon out of Toronto. And the superintendent there speaks about how that exact setting, that weekly meeting in which he has in Buildots the plan of what was agreed to do this week. And he has percent complete against those items. So if you think about it, he has a sort of a pool planning plan in which it says, you guys said you will do duct work on level 4, and you did 50%, and here's what you didn't do. And what that drives is accountability with everyone involved, because as you say, nobody can hide anymore behind anything. So we measure that in all sorts of ways, but basically it ends up being that more of the weekly plan is achieved every week. We measure things like percent plan complete weekly and stuff like that. And that also translates, of course, to the whole schedule of the project eventually, and delays. Then you have that management of individual subs. One example is of a high-rise building, actually in Israel, that used this recently to very, very early on see that their carpenters are just not performing enough. Just the pace of work is such that they're currently at a week's delay. But if you project their pace of work, they're going to end up at 3 months delay. And then you catch that very early, and you suddenly have a real discussion with them. And then they agreed a plan for 3 weeks of how to improve that. That plan failed. That subcontractor could not bring in the resource to meet that plan. So at the end of those 3 weeks, they said, okay, we're bringing in another sub to take some of the scope. And their point there was to say, we would have gotten to the point where we bring another sub. It just would have happened 3 months later. And we would have incurred all that delay now. And we would have had the chaos of trying to catch up and of working on more areas at the same time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And lastly is that small details. We call it loose ends, but it's this thing where someone forgets one thing, or maybe not even forgets, but just can't do one thing. and then the next trade comes in and can't do one thing because of that, and then the next trade, and then the next trade. And you end up having 5 return visits of each of them going back to that floor, to that apartment or that space or whatever to complete work. And that just disrupts the whole process. And that build group that I mentioned before, that's basically their thing with Buildots. Weekly process, reviewing the loose ends. Loose ends are basically where the system says you did 90-something% of the work, and the last 5% you didn't do. Here's the last 5%. Here are the 2 outlets that weren't, roughed in. Here is the one piece of wall that wasn't taped. Here is the one piece of wall that wasn't boarded, whatever it is. Reviewing that weekly, closing out everything that's possible to just reduce that negative effect of return visits, comebacks, whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's super powerful because trade stacking is one of the things on job sites that really, really causes problems long term, and creates unsafe environments, reduces productivity, etc. And so often we're so far behind by the time it's time to try to catch up. It's useless, right? We're not gonna catch up. And so you're talking about making micro adjustments early to prevent that. And then, you kind of said it, you have like a poll plan in there kind of thing. One of the things that Lean and Tact and others teach us is like having to stop and restart work. So moving from floor 5 back down to floor 4 because those people are out of your way, and then back up to 5 and back down to 4, that makes you completely unproductive. And so it's probably cascading into other areas. But man, it's a unique opportunity, right? To band-aid things up front by being obvious and transparent about it. I'm wondering if you get pushback on that.
Sometimes, but I think eventually it's all, you talked about not building tech that, searches for a problem, but looking at the problem. And I think the only way that I think maybe some companies make the mistake of, and I've made that mistake sometimes in certain capabilities that we've built, sitting in our office and thinking to myself, oh, it would be really good if a construction project could be managed this way. I'm going to build that capability. And then you build the whole thing and you come to a superintendent or a PM or whoever, and they look at it and tell you, are you an idiot? What do you want from me?
I would never do that.
And, just for instance, with this idea of loose ends and return visits, this has all come from working together with our customers. I mean, this system started showing things at 90-something%. And as it did that, I started seeing companies like Build Group focus on that last 5%. And then sitting down with Chad, who's their VP of operations, he suddenly explains to me, look, you think that the problem with the last 5% is that, that maybe that somebody then charges me extra to go back to an area and complete it. So day works or whatever. And he goes, but that's not the problem. The problem is that my electrician now or whoever takes people off of the 20th floor to go back down to the 8th floor to complete things. That means that he's disrupting, or the situation is disrupting, the progress on the 20th floor, which I need to keep the flow of construction. And also the guys working on the 8th floor, they don't have their equipment, so they end up standing on the countertop to try and install a light, which damages my quality and is unsafe. And he goes, and there's all these ripple effects, and you don't get to learn these things without working hand in hand with the real people who are doing the real job. And if you do, then you know how to tell people what it is you expect them to get from it. And if you don't have what you expect them to get from it, just their bosses or their owner or whatever, then forget about it. They're not going to do it.
Because you guys are in a rare position of getting true constructability documentation as built, of not just what's installed, but when and how, in a way that can validate the accuracy of a schedule, in a way that can validate the accuracy of a coordinated BIM model. And I'm curious, long term, where you guys, and maybe this is a little early in the conversation on this, but curious your expectations or possibly your optimism towards this new data that's never been possible before, right? We've never had technology that could do this in human history. And now that we are unleashing this on projects for the first time, I'm curious your long-term expectations on what this data will do for the industry from the standpoint of getting true as-built documentation of how it was built.
Yeah, look, there's the famous, you can't manage what you can't measure. And it eventually comes down to that. We just, earlier this year, we produced this study from 64 projects looking at efficiency of construction. So one statistic that we extracted from 64 projects worldwide, and it's, the kind of GCs that buy advanced technology like Buildots are not, are good GCs. And it shows, for instance, that on average, on all these projects, every week, less than half of the available area is being actually worked on. Less than half. So you have half of your project standing there, nothing happening. And there are other statistics there as well. But the point is, once you start measuring these things and you start looking into them, then you can improve the things that are causing them. And I can't do that. I can just collect the data and provide it and then work hand in hand with my customers. We started doing that with a few. One fade-out contractor looking at how they installed ductwork on floors, and just together looking at all the data that Buildots captured from, 50 floors from however many projects of theirs, seeing what happens when they complete a floor in 7 working days, do all the ductwork, and what happens when they complete it in 17, because that's the range. And they figured it out together with us based on the data, and now they have a process that makes sure it's the 7. It all has to do with the material used to connect the AC unit and the rest of the duct, but it's a long story.
You hit a couple things. So one, I actually covered that article and some of that data that you guys released, and I hit it 2 ways. Because one, it's super powerful that there are so many parts of a job site that remain unproductive for periods of time. However, we have a tendency to swing the other way, right? And the owner shows up and they're like, why aren't you working over here? Get over there and get over here and get over there and back to the tact and flow, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? You should be working in flow in certain areas. So I think it's a combination of, are we at the right velocity in the right areas and staying on track? Or are we under, velocity because we don't have people working on those floors ahead of us and those areas occupied? So a good point is like, can't have drywall and that stuff going up if you don't have framing, right? So if the framers are the problem and they're not above us working on floor 48 and we're on 47, then we got a problem, and it should tell us that. And it should say, hey, I should have people on 48 right now framing, or we're all going to stack up. So it's an interesting caveat to understand that. You're shaking your head. It's kind of like you've tried to balance this, right?
I think it's all about, look, when we just started, our very first project that actually paid and used this system was here in London. And it was introduced to the wider team at some point because we started out working with just like a couple guys on site. They started making jokes about how this tool will now collect all the information and then make all the decisions, and they can go home and they don't have a job. And I told them, look, that is never going to happen. Data, information is useless without someone applying what they know about the project and what's the right thing and making the right decisions. This is for you. This cannot, in any world, without you, it's useless. And that's the point of what you say. It's, yes, there are all sorts of data and metrics and information, and now somebody has to figure out, is it a problem that I'm not utilizing those areas? Are other things a problem? Actually, more like one of the things we used there, we called it trade inconsistency, basically the difference in output from one week to the next. It was crazy town variations. I have a graph from a project that shows how on 1 week they installed 27 AC units, the next 8, the next 12, the next 3, the next, like that. And you look at this graph, and then I say, well, honestly, we spoke before the recording about manufacturing. If I am Elon Musk and I walk into a Tesla factory and they tell me, oh, we produced 27 engines this week, but 8 last week, I'm shutting down the factory. This can't be. How can you manage things this way?
Yep.
But somebody has to look at all that and decide what's important. It's not for me to say.
Yeah, and decide what's important, but also identify what might be the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And in that same scenario, when you're doing that many, maybe it's, a certain set of parts didn't make it. Maybe it's the crane pick that was slowing the ability to have those units available on the floors or the places where they needed to be. There's lots of reasons, right? Part of the problem is we're afraid to find out the reasons for some odd reason. That's a lot of saying reason over and over. But for some strange reason, we don't want to necessarily know the problems, but it's like, if we know the problems, then we as humans can make a good decision and possibly get ahead of it. That's it. That's the power, right? Eveart, the power is in transparency to then react and make changes and make improvements. It's carrot versus stick, maybe, is part of the problem, the way we use tech.
And that's what I'm thinking is, long-term mass adoption will lead to change in other ancillary workflows involved in construction, and really specifically towards cash flow projections. And being able to have variable cash flow projection instead of a S curve or right leaning curve. You're going to have potentially, if you're really paying out paychecks based on percentage complete and quality, then that's not going to be a smooth curve. And I think that in and of itself will kind of re-incentivize trades in a way to be as efficient as possible, because it's not going to be a project manager that approves their payout requests. It's going to be AI or potentially a computer that is quantifying their impact on the project, validating its quality, and then releasing the payment or releasing the approval. And that's where I think it's exciting time right now, is because that in and of itself, being able to have a non-biased third-party technology approach towards progress tracking and taking it out of the hands of a project manager or even an entity that may have a little bit of unknown bias built into their approach towards managing the progress or tracking the progress. I think that in and of itself will revolutionize how cash flow is projected, as well as potentially revolutionize how quality is ensured on projects from the standpoint of quantifying impact of a trade, releasing payment based on their impact. And then from there, the domino effect of how contracts will be written, I think, will change.
Interesting. So
I gotta jump in on that and just say that.
Go ahead.
I think my experience has shown that people who think, call it, even the more experienced people in this industry understand that it's not a zero-sum game. I have sometimes, people that come to speak to me and consider Buildots, and they talk about using Buildots as a way of basically hitting their subcontractors. But when you understand that the project as a project can just be far more efficient and everybody wins, then you start approaching things differently. And I think that's what can happen to this industry. In a world where there is no truth, because it's all like very dynamic and subjective data collection, I can see why anyone faced with a situation will protect themselves and their business and say things that they're not sure of just to be on the safe side. But suddenly you can introduce the transparency and suddenly everyone can win. I was shocked when this happened, but that first project that I mentioned, I came to visit at one point and I was sure the subcontractors hate me because the system showed where they were delayed and it showed where one of them installed the window 1 meter out of position and all sorts of things. And I thought they're going to shank me or something. And then they come to me, a couple of them, and these are the two that we found the most delays for, the system found, and a few major quality issues. And they come to me and say, we want to introduce you to other GCs that we're working with, because it's in our benefit that this exists there and everybody can collaborate more. That's the way.
Well, and that's the cultural shift, right? Those particular trade partners that are interested in that have bought into the change that we need in construction, right? We need that change. And when people are listening in, I've said this quite a few times, like everybody needs to make money, right? Like I need my subcontractors, my trade contractors to make money. I need the GCs to make money. I need the owner to get a product that's worth it. I need the designers to make money. So, but that's not why they're all in business, right? You don't buy a car just to put gas in it. You put gas in it so it takes you to the places that you want to go. It achieves the goals that you want to achieve. And that's the understanding that those groups involved in that delivery, and Eveart, you said this earlier, it'll run to a changing contract method. It's the ones who buy into, okay, we can all make our fair share and we can actually deliver a better project. And lo and behold, we might have a better experience in the process because we're transparently helping one another and understanding where problems exist. It's great if you have a little problem and somebody reaches out a hand and picks you up. And I think what you found in your world there was that those GCs were reaching out a hand to those contractors and saying, trade contractors and partners, and saying, hey, we see a problem. Is there something we can do to help? And it might be, hey, yeah, like the lift, my crew is being held up by the lift every day because, you know, you have this group coming on at the same time as this group. Oh, well, I'll tweak that. And now we won't have those, just little things, but it's buying into it.
Yeah, and this is what's exciting is like we finally have an approach that takes out humans' limitations as far as management. You can't see everything. You can't be aware of everything. You can't make the best decisions as a human, but you can train a model. You can train a system to monitor something. And it kind of reminds me of, I think it was a ESPN report around Shane Battier, who's played for Miami Heat. When LeBron James and Dwayne Wade were on the same team several years ago when they won the championship. And one of the things that they called out was the fact that when Shane Battier was on the court, the entire team performed better. And it's not necessarily calling out Shane Battier's stats as a highlight player, but his time on the court had a correlation to the amount of points LeBron was scoring and the other teammates. And they only were able to find this out because of the data that they're tracking at that time, which was new data for the NBA. And I relate it to this opportunity we have with technology being able to quantify impact because, to a point, trade contractors have a contract that says, I will deliver X by Y. The Z is the variable that they use, the amount of people, the technology, all the variables that they use to achieve the X and Y. But that Z is also something that historically we've never had access to as far as data. And what I think this is an opportunity for, just like what the NBA did, was being able to say to a trade contractor, hey, if you use these 5 people instead of these 10 people, we've quantified that they are actually more efficient and faster. So you can probably reduce your overhead, still make the same amount of money on the contract, and be a more efficient company potentially if we start to track everything. And then take the approach from a standpoint and perspective of we're monitoring you and change the shift or change the mindset into we're enabling you to understand yourself better. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity with more technology on the job site that can track and monitor in a way that other industries do it.
We've seen exactly that, actually, on one job. They asked us to help them with an analysis. They have turnstiles coming into the job site. They pulled from that the amount of carpenters that were on the job every day because they were experiencing delay with drywall. And the trade contractor was telling them that, hey, look, over the last 2 months, I brought far more people. And then you combine the amount of people with how much work has been done, and also the system showing that work was available. And it actually showed them that, yeah, they brought more people. It was actually over the summer. Their good guys have gone back home on holiday, and this new bunch of guys that they brought in is just far less effective. But obviously, as you say, they're not paying them far less than they're paying the other guys. Or if you'd like, they're not paying those other guys far more because they're that far more effective.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's interesting. All right. So I do want to go with where Buildots go, but I had something that I wrote down because you said you can't manage what you can't measure. And I haven't read this book yet, but it's actually in my Audible, and it says measure what matters. So how do you manage what you can't measure, but how do you measure what matters? What matters when someone's thinking about, hey, I just want to know what I'm doing. What are some of the benchmarks? What are some of the things they should be looking at? What the heck matters in construction to measure anyway?
Well, I think it varies from project to project, from company to company. there are a few. I mean, we come in every time. We have customer success managers. These are people that we've brought from construction companies, hired, taught them Buildots, and they work with our projects. And the first thing they'll do is say, hey, let's set up some things that you care about. And one company is looking at this, what we call projected delay, meaning if I continue working at this pace, when will things finish? Another is looking at PPC, how much of the things we're discussing in a weekly meeting actually happens, because I want to have certainty that I know where things are going, and I want my subcontractors to have certainty that when something is said to will be done at a certain time, it will be, and they can bring their resource the next day. Others look at this idea of loose ends and return visits and how much. I think there are a number of things you can be looking at and optimize, because that's what matters to you.
We've seen some of the news articles. We've covered some of the fundraising. So, there's a lot of traction for you guys at Buildots. What are some of the future problems? Where do you really see your next steps? And if construction company listening in, what are some of the things you'd be focusing on in the future?
The two main things are two things that we discussed. One is expanding the collaboration, basically making it a tool that can be used, with logistics purposes, with, cranes, whatever. I mean, looking at how I work with more and more people based on this data on the project. And that's something we're working towards. We're actually piloting something right now with one of our customers to look at how can this system give them the alert at the right time that says, hey, based on the lead time that you told me, you need to order this material now if you want it here on site when it's meant to be used.
Can you put Buildots in pre-construction? Because a lot of them are 52 weeks out. We got to order that stuff early. We think you're going to use this. You should order that now.
Yeah. And the other big deal is what happens with this data. To your Eveart's point, it's about how is this starting to collect data in a way that tells someone, look, I see you're building that schedule as you're tendering for a job. Maybe you're going to do something very different now. But just know that you've never hit such productivity numbers. The most you've hit is 80% of that. And now let's figure out what's going to go down once you win this job, potentially.
That's great. Yeah, here's the reality. Let's have a reality check, and let's figure out what we're going to do. Well,
again, people, that's just content. People apply context. Sometimes you're going to build a far more aggressive schedule because you want to win the job, and you know that then you have to figure it out and do what you do. Okay, you do that. That's your decision. This will give you the content.
Well, that it's good. I like that future. It wasn't, thankfully, you didn't answer, it was Buildots AI or Buildots-GPT. That's a common one we'll hear. So we didn't hear that. But I'm interested too, though, on kind of a final question for you is like, with those changes in AI and ChatGPT and large language models and the other things so many people are hearing about, what are your thoughts on it, and kind of what are your thoughts on how it might impact the data sets and the things that you guys are collecting for the future?
I think it's about, it's that analysis of those data sets potentially that will benefit. Because right now, in my example from before, we had to sit down, a data specialist from my team and someone from the client team working together for a while to understand that ductwork issue and what the answer is. But if that guy from that GC had the ability to just use a ChatGPT-like thing and sort of ask questions about the data that way, that would have been far more efficient. So the interpretation of the data, the looking into it, the deriving conclusions from it, and getting the answers you need, that's where the potential of that lies, in my mind.
I'm curious around the feasibility of the construction industry adopting a large language model for their projects, or if there's too much confidentiality in the data for it to be released into a large language model. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Before confidentiality, I think the first issue is lack of structure, meaning I have seen dozens of construction schedules I rarely see two that call the same activity by the same name. Maybe just wall framing, because that basic of a name. But I have second fix partitions, close up, wall closure, drywall close up, boarding. All these names I've seen for the act of closing up the walls and boarding them. So until that happens, it's very difficult. Machines can't handle that variability, the variance. Yeah. After that, look, confidentiality is an issue, but if you look at a solution like Buildots or others, giving you access to just answers on top of the data without you being able to look at data of a particular project or particular company, I don't see the issue in that.
Do you see a future in which we're sharing data, we meaning construction companies with technology providers, sharing data in a very vague way, not specific data, not tied to them, but being able to release their data to help make more informed decisions for the industry going forward? Because this is a question I asked several weeks ago regarding, pushing the industry forward from a cost management standpoint, because cost is what actually, to a degree, the closest thing we have to insights on the project is what was paid out versus what was expected. And I think collectively, the master code format, at least in the United States, the master code format is the closest thing we have to an agreed language from either the 16 division CSI code or the 48 division CSI code, and being able to say, 3300 is concrete, so on and so forth, as a first step. From there, the rest of the cost code changes, right? It's variable based on the company, based on the project, and kind of based on the project manager to a degree. But that said, do you see a future in which there's some low-hanging fruit data that collectively on an international level, we'd be able to start giving away to an entity? Not saying what this entity is, if it's private, if it's public, or how it's structured, but is there a future that you see where this is possible? And what would it take to kind of make those first steps?
Definitely. And I don't think that's necessarily that big an issue. I mean, even that study that I mentioned used data of my customers. It's just that they agree for me to use it in a way that doesn't implicate them, their projects, how they do things, but anonymously collect all of it and, drive insight from it. That is something that people all in all accept.
Gotcha. Wow.
Well, with that, I'd love to keep you along and keep going down the rabbit hole, but I think we got to move it on to the news. And as you guys know, Aviv's going to join us and stay with us for the news. We're going to do it a little differently today, though. So here we are for our construction technology news of the week. So I am giving my partner in crime, Eveart Foster, a little break today, and I am handling the news because, well, let's be honest, I got this show together pretty late, and Eveart was awesome enough to jump on with me. So the burden should fall on me. And my first article for the week is not a great one, and it happened a little while ago, but I think it's something we have to remind ourselves once in a while as we talk about construction and the construction industry and safety. Crane partially collapses in Midtown Manhattan, injuring 11. 9 civilians and 2 firefighters were hurt when the crane on the 10th Avenue collapsed, officials said. Unfortunately, one of the operators was working in the machine's cabin. They were lifting 16 tons of concrete and saw the fire, but tried and failed with a hand extinguisher to extinguish it before having to flee himself, because the operator had to get out of the crane before it fell. The injured folks were on the ground below, and a couple of the firefighters that responded. This could have been a lot worse, which goes to the fact that at all times in our world of construction, you have to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And so having the scene cordoned off, using a pick plan and using and understanding where it was going was super important. We can't really know when, it was a hydraulic line that ruptured. So there's things we can't do, things we have to, and why we have certain safety procedures in place. So this was a rough one. I'm interested, Eveart, we see cranes a lot. We use cranes in our world as a kind of an indicator of a city and how it's building. But have you ever really considered that it's a pretty crazy dangerous thing to be doing.
I mean, I've walked on several project sites here in Chicago, and had to keep a straight face of calmness as I'm walking up some of these ladders on the side of a building with the wind blowing left and right, and what looks like anti-fall protection there that I just, didn't fully trust. But as one of the jobs, I look up at these cranes, the highest point of view on the job site. I'm like, I don't think I could do this job. I'm so fortunate to have experienced a lot of the skills and the resources that are required to actually physically construct a project. But that's one position that I got to tip my hat off to, as far as crane operators, anyone who's, flying off the side of a building to help build it. But it's kind of crazy how many risks are involved in construction, from the standpoint of physical bodily risk, and how many people just walk through it with just such grace because of all the experience they have. So that's where I'm just even astounded for the Manhattan accident that, had they not been trained, had they not been experienced, it could have been a lot more catastrophic. Unluckily, it wasn't. So it's just another testament to the level of skill and expertise involved in this industry, especially in, cities like New York or Chicago or LA, where, you have generations of people coming into the construction industry and fulfilling, the requirements of that project site with speed and extreme skill. So this is amazing that they were able to do it safely.
Yeah. Yeah. Aviv, I'm interested because, it's just a difficult business and bad things happen at times. Bad things, even when you plan for the best, right? And you do your best. So, interesting, rough one. Thoughts?
I think the one thought I have, and obviously I don't know the example and I might be very reaching here, but is that if a world can be built, and I think I strive to be part of that world, obviously not by any means the full answer, but part of, in which everything happens in a calmer way. There's less stress and chaos on site, then maybe we'll hear less of those stories, and not just physical stuff, but also I've heard from superintendents speaking about the fact that they wake up at 4 a.m. because there's a noise outside and they can't fall back to sleep because their mind is already busy with, what's going to hit me today on site and this and that. And I think that the construction industry takes on itself everything. Like, yeah, can't do attitude. I can do this. I can do that. Oh, you want me to build a freaking, ball that stands on a twig for you at 200 miles high? Yeah, sure. I can do it. I can do it in 2 weeks. And maybe with time, technology being part of it, it can, be more sustainable in that sense.
Yeah, it is a good point. And I think, Eveart, you made a good point that there's so many people that go to work every day that we see those cranes and we don't hear about this all the time. So this is awesome. And you're right, Aviv, a world in which our project managers and our superintendents get a good night's sleep because they're going to be armed with the information that they need to make the decisions to keep the project moving forward. Everybody who's rested, everybody who's less stressed and a little bit less of those bad things in our brains, those worries, those physical, keeps us sharper and we can see those problems. And not that in this case, that person could have found anything, but what if, in the future, something alerts us to these things before they happen? It would be fantastic to see even more. So it's always room to get better, but hey, this is a tough world. I'm going to move us on though, because we've got an interesting one. I love AI, but I also love a good mistake. So this is an interesting article from Insurance Thought Leadership. I'm pretty sure I got this from my good friend Rose Hall again. It's an article by Paul Carroll. It's the 10 biggest mistakes in AI strategies. And I thought these were great because I think having an AI strategy and understanding that AI and things like large language models are really going to fundamentally change our world, it's good to know the stumbles so that you can really build on a platform that works. So a couple of the quick ones, and I'll ask you guys about these, but a lack of clear objectives. I want AI and a large language model for what reason? Why do you want this? Well, it's cool. Cool's not a business strategy, so we need to get past that. Failure to adopt a change management strategy. I think this is huge. Aviv, you've seen this. Eveart, you've seen this. You've been on both sides of it. Change management is something in construction we really don't understand fundamentally from the ground up. And I think it prevents the depth of penetration of great technology, because, honestly, the industry hasn't really reached a good change management strategy. Overestimating AI's capabilities, we can go ad nauseum for that one. Not testing and validating AI systems. So one of the big problems of going down the route is really not putting it through the rigor that we put other things through. Every one of you out there has gotten an email now, pretty much probably, that you can tell an AI wrote for you, and you almost can pick it out without knowing now. It's that easy. Ignoring ethics and privacy concerns. This is my big one. The world of technology will not function without really good ethics. And if you think you're allowed to train your models on certain data, you better be sure you own that data and that it is yours. And you can look back to our discussion with KP Reddy on that one. Inadequate talent acquisition and development. So really putting it in the hands of the wrong people. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, is where I'll go with that one. Neglecting a data strategy. Aviva, love that one. You've got to have a data strategy. If you have really bad data, you're not going to know the full story. Inadequate budget and resource allocation. This is one of the things I've tried to teach construction industry is, listen, just because you can, again, doesn't mean you should, because you might not have the funding to fully commit to a fully fledged, commercially capable, enterprise capable product. It takes a lot more money and time and dedication than you think. Treating AI as a one-time project. It's not a one-time project. It's a strategy. And then finally, this is my favorite, and Jake Olson and Jonathan Marsh, this is for you because I talk about it all the time. Scalability, scalability, scalability. Just because you build it for a single project does not mean it will work at an enterprise level. So I'm interested, guys. Aviv, I'm gonna start with you, and Eveart, I'm gonna let that marinate for you for a little while. What are your thoughts on some of these big mistakes and some of the things that you've heard from the article?
For me, it all starts from, I think, what was the first one, and that's just the headline of it all. Are you playing a game, or are you trying to, you know what you're trying to achieve, basically? My one thing that I hate is when someone from our sales team gets me on a call with, I don't know, an innovation manager in one company, that the process that innovation manager is going through is just, looking at technology and looking at what's cool. If you don't know what you're trying to solve, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then you'll end up playing a game, and then you won't invest the resource that you need to one of your other points, and you won't have a strategy of what you're trying to achieve, and it will all fall apart. Yes, maybe we'll we'll play a fun little game on a project, but is it going somewhere?
Yeah.
So that applies to AI too. That applies to any change that you introduce. Do you have a clear path? Do you know where you're going?
You're right. It's pretty fundamental. Eveart, what are your thoughts, man?
It's kind of interesting. So you look at construction over the last several years, and there's been a massive increase with people with either an innovation title, a technology title, adoption management title, something dedicated towards the procurement of new processes and technology at their organization in a continuous, non-ending cycle, which means the construction industry now is at a point of continuously changing the way they do business as a business strategy. So sitting in autopilot is not possible anymore with the level of technology that's available outside of the industry, just as a horizontal technology scope that you have available for your organization, as well as the volume of options that you have available now, in which we have to have a full-time manager or a leader dedicated towards vetting and adopting new strategies around technology, which shows the demands of technology to augment a lot of processes that were historically human, and the increased rate in which we need automation, we need technology to fill in the gaps that are growing wider and wider because of the talent shortage. So talent shortage mixed with the headwinds of harder, more complex projects with tighter schedules, tighter profit margins are going to continuously demand that every single contractor or stakeholder, even not just GCs or specialty trades, but architects, engineers, developers, have a consistent resource dedicated towards making their company more efficient. And I think that in and of itself it could possibly become a major at universities, is technology adoption management or something like that, where you have to be able to understand how to vet technology, how to evaluate technology, how to create a product roadmap for your company, as well as how to measure the performance of the technology once it's been implemented. I think that in and of itself for the construction industry is unique relative to other industries. And that's what makes it really exciting to be on calls like this, because I think in and of itself, this becomes an MIT level conversation in which we're talking with grad school students on, how to optimize your AI delivery for your construction firm. I think that's what's going to be really exciting, is there's going to be dedicated resources forever now on technology strategy for construction.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that course is you've got to add the human component.
Yeah.
Oh, do we forget the human component? Part of a good change management strategy is understanding your culture and understanding how to work with it and be productive inside of your culture. The culture of the workforce has changed, and it's changing even more rapidly than ever because of our experiences with technology, with innovation in every other part of our lives. So I'd add to that, and then Eveart, I'd be all over that course being offered and that degree being offered for construction management. So,
all right, Professor Sample.
Professor, hey, that's my future. Professor Sample, someday when I'm grayer and older than I am today, which by the way is not too long from now, unfortunately. So I'm going to throw a little curveball that the guys didn't know was coming today. So I've got one more article because I got to talk about it. I saw it come across on Construction Dive. What architects want GCs to know? So this is an interesting one. Design pros from across the country say they value close collaboration with their construction colleagues. It starts off with collaboration, but it's interesting because the AGC and the AIA did some work together, and 80% of architects and 73% of contractors agree that early and frequent collaboration targeted during design development is the ideal project phase for starting teamwork. That's right. Architects are saying we should get closer together sooner. And I think that's a powerful statement, leaning towards some of the things, Eveart, we've talked about earlier today, is that, changing contracts, changing methodologies, changing the way we deliver is really important. And we've always designed and engineered and constructed and in relative silos, and breaking down those silos is critical. And it's really come down to a couple of things for architects, at least, that, design intent is huge. We say this all the time. Contractors design the intent out all the time. Honestly, because they're not connected to it, and contractually they weren't, and architects were gone from the project by then, by the time some of this was there. And some of the things exacerbating it are substitutions, right? It is so hard to get all the materials. We were joking about it earlier that, 50 weeks, 52 weeks on panels and other things. Well, so substitutions sometimes are important, but, if you don't know the design intent, how do you know if a proposed alternatives align with the goal or not? Or are you just doing it to save money? And I think some of our historical things come back at us on, pointing fingers instead of really understanding intent and then communicating, we believe that the intent is, and we think these alternative materials reach there. And then sustainability. I think this is a big one that we're going to see more of, but understanding a sustainability goal of a company and the long-term operating cost. We're so focused on the 20% of cost that we represent in a building's life cycle in construction, when honestly there's 80% more, which is in the operation and the inhabitants of that building, which speaks to a lot of the other things we want to do in the long term. But I thought I'd just throw this one. Do you think, Eveart, you think GCs and architects can get along?
That's a great question. I've thought about this before, and it's kind of interesting that the way in which a GC gets paid and the way in which an architect gets paid are different. Architect gets a fee, usually 5% fee. The GC takes most of the revenue of the hard costs, mixed with a little bit of the soft costs, puts a markup on it, and manages all the trades for physical delivery of the building. And what's interesting is, in order for the GC to even pursue a project or to bid on a project to be competitive with other GCs in their recipe of trades, is for the architect to have designed at least, a certain percentage of schematic designs or construction drawings. In a scenario in which a GC and an architect come up with that, it means there's no bid sent to GCs, which in a way that either creates a monopoly or it allows the GC to kind of bulldoze a contract in to the project that may not be the best contract. So it's a little bit of a dance between the architect and the GC collaborating in a way that's truthful and honest to the owner, that is also competitive to that architect working with another GC or another duo, a joint venture between two companies pursuing a project. So in a way, I guess it depends on how many architects the owner has full time that can create RFP. And then from there, you go in as a group, architect A and GC A versus architect B and GC B. And maybe that approach could actually allow us to get more efficient with project delivery. And then ultimately you'd have architects and general contractors using the same office long term. But it's a unique problem, because in order for a GC to even give you a price, something has to be designed schematically.
Yep. Aviv, I'm wondering, especially given you're on that heavy construction side, just looking up and wondering about what the intent was of a design and sort of, can the GCs and the architects get together?
I think it's, we talked about people before. People can get along, it's just that when you can write up an RFI and send it into the mist, then maybe you can be, a bit more aggressive and a bit less collaborative and a bit more whatever, or respond to that RFI. When people are in the same room and people are people, or they're, and technology can help with that. Here we are, three of us, right? We're not by any means too close physically, but we're here. I think that's the answer, because actually one of our customers, they do this thing, they call it a big room. So all the architects and people from the GC will sit together for like months, and then it's about people, and then people get along.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Those big rooms, if they put them in a big room and they actually adopt and start talking to one another, it's great. But have you seen them where they put them in the quote unquote big room, but they still give them cubes and they still email each other and leave and don't talk? Because that's when you're like, wait a minute. That didn't work how you wanted it to work. But so that's the difference between, a cultural shift and just a physical shift. They're very different. So, great points. Eveart, you've got a little something coming up. So, before I let you do that, I want you to announce that before we go. But I wanted to say congratulations to a friend of mine from the road, one of the, pioneers in the ConTech world from Tenna, Jess Simpson, had the opportunity to present at NAWIC. And I just believe that what NAWIC is doing and the opportunities that it is given to an industry that is classically, tough for women to get into. And then technology itself is really tough for women to break into. We have to celebrate those people. So, Jess had the opportunity to present at NAWIC. The topic was evolving the construction industry, people versus process. Wish I could have been there for it, Jess. Congratulations on taking the big stage. I know you're a little nervous, but you've earned it. So I hope it went really, really well. And to everybody else that enjoyed and went to NAWIC this year, congratulations. Eveart, you've got a little something coming up now, don't you?
Yep. So being here in Chicago, I get the opportunity to be at some of the events that are focused on construction. So as some of your listeners may already know, and Jeff, as you know, I used to work at Pepper Construction. That's how I got into the industry. It's all coming full circle. So at the Advancing Construction Technology Conference, me and Jen Seworth, who's a VP of Technology at Pepper, will share the stage on a fireside chat where I'll get to interview her around the strategy in which she decides how to do technology adoption, how to evolve the technology roadmap for Pepper, and then her overall thoughts on how to deliver innovation through disruption and disruptive thinking to deliver innovation. And then the next day, or 2 days later, after that, I'll be going to the AGC IT conference to deliver a presentation on and Autodesk doesn't know this just yet, but they will. They're going to love it. Is the life cycle of an issue on a project, meaning from pre-con to facilities management. Do you have a paper trail of why that asset looks the way it does and is installed the way it is? And do you have an infrastructure set up at your organization to be able to hand that over to a stakeholder when the project's finished? And I'll be exploring a concept that I've mapped out for Autodesk that explains the life cycle of an issue. And I'm really excited about that because it's a new approach towards understanding an infrastructure of a project management tech stack and how multiple stakeholders can collaborate on a single issue and drive value for the project. So I'm excited about that. And then, Jeff, I don't know if you remember this, but that's actually where we met at the AGC IT conference. This will be my first one actually attending, but we met at the happy hour a few years back. And it just shows how tight this community is with construction, but I'm excited to go there for the first time. And I know that you're going to be there as well, so we'll connect.
Yeah, I will be the MC for that event, so I will be announcing and introducing you possibly, and you may not believe that I actually remember that, but I fully remember it. We snuck you into the happy hour, so I hope no one's listening to this. We snuck you into the happy hour, and it was you, James, and I standing at a high top, and we had a discussion, and I was like, that is somebody we need to keep an eye on. He's going to make a difference. And here you are on the show. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to see you there. Crazy week in Chicago next week. So, well, it'll have been a couple of weeks ago after this comes out. But with that, Aviv, thanks for sitting in today and being our guest. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for the chat, guys, and thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and hey, go check out the Buildots team for sure. They are doing fantastic things. Eveart, it's great to sit down with you again.
Thank you. And thank you, Aviv. I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you. I got some questions and ideas, so we'll definitely connect.
Awesome.
Thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Aviv Leibovici. To read all our news stories, learn more about our guests, and to listen to this show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.